One of my favorite recipes of all time is my wild green cakes. These have been on the Today Show, a couple other shows. They're going on another TV show here in the Twin Cities in May. This is such a good recipe. It's the first recipe in my book, you will see here. And it's a first recipe for a reason because you can use basically any leafy green plant that you want and you can turn it into a side dish. You can put it on a bun. You can turn it into a frisbee. This is such a versatile, awesome recipe for just about any leafy green plant from the garden, from the woods. You can see I have a bunch of different greens here. I have some sochan, some watercress. You can make it with just spinach. Like there's some spinach there. I also have some mustard greens. I have some garlic mustard. We're going to add some dandelions. One thing to keep in mind here is that the stems need to be removed as much as possible. And then I'm also going to break this rule and show you that I'm going to use some dandelions here. So I'm just not going to use a ton of dandelions. These are cultivated dandelions. You can see they have a nice big stem. The stem is going to make it a little bit harder for the cakes to hold together, but it's totally fine. Just make sure to chop them up really fine. So I take all my greens and I'm going to blanch them in boiling salted water. Just put those plants into a pot and cook them for like 30 seconds. Take them out. You really want to keep the water at a nice brisk simmer or a boil. It's just hard for me to kind of control some of the heat here because it'll fog up my camera lens. So blanch your greens in salted water, take them out, rinse them in some cool water. That might seem silly, rinsing the salt off of the greens, but not all of it's going to get removed. And this is important to help the greens be nice and tender. Now, also very important, there's a bunch of important steps here. We're going to squeeze as much water as we possibly can out of the greens. Do you see how those dandelion stems are kind of unwieldy? Yeah, we want to use a larger proportion of leaves than stems, but some stems are okay. You just have to make sure to chop them up nice and fine. So I'm going to chop up all the greens, get them nice and fine so we can make them into little patties. Something like that is going to be fine. This is a rustic recipe. I rarely have ever, I don't think I've ever made it the same way twice with the same types of greens. Take your greens after you squeeze the water out. Really get as much water out as you can. Season them with a little bit of salt. Then we're going to add some pepper. I'll add a pinch of nutmeg if I want. You can add different whole seeds and things like that. I'll add wild caraway seed. I might add a little cumin. Then I'm going to add a little bit of egg and some flour. This is gluten-free flour, so it has a slightly different hydration ratio than regular AP. So I may need to add a little bit of extra flour. We're just going to mix that all up. Then I'll taste a little bit, see if it needs anything, and it's okay. Now we're going to cook a little test batch. This is just like making sausage. We just want to test the flavor and the bind and make sure that everything is going to hold together well. And we just take a little piece and cook it until it's totally cooked through, just to see how it's going to work out. Now, it was holding together, but it could be a little bit more, so I add a little bit more flour. Like I said, this is a rustic recipe. Depending on how much water you can squeeze out, you might have to add a little bit more flour. We're not going to add any egg. We just adjust the consistency with a little spoonful of flour. Repeat and cook an extra little patty until it's good to you, until you like the flavor and you like the texture. Now we're just going to make patties, patty those greens up, and you can do this beforehand. They'll actually cook better if you make it like an hour before or leave them overnight. And now we're going to cook the patties. On the Today Show, they called them weed cakes. I found that kind of offensive. But it's all good because you can make them out of just about any weed that you want. Now, cook the patties, and an important thing is to kind of press them down a little bit. It's just going to help them cook. It's going to help them get evenly browned, and it's very important to brown them well. The better that you brown each side of the cake, you can see I'm pressing them down there a little bit with the spatula, the better that you cook and color the sides of the cake. Those are almost a little too dark. It's just hard for me to control the heat on this silly little induction burner. If you don't color the sides of the cakes, they may not hold together too well, and you may have some fall apart. So you really want to get some good color. Don't be afraid of adding a little bit of extra oil to the pan. It's a really easy recipe. And that is kind of what you're looking for. This is a good batch I made on my stove and brought it over to my studio. You can see that they hold together. They should be slightly crisp on the outside, soft, borderline creamy on the inside, depending which kind of greens you use. You can serve them with a lemon wedge. I have them here with a little bit of ramp dip. So good. Make them with any greens that you have. Garden greens, wild greens, pick a green, any green. Mix and match your favorites. It's so good. One of my favorite recipes of all time. The recipe's in my book, but it's also on my website. There's a link to that at the top of the video description. Thanks for watching.